Mm-hmm. I've never finished it.
I'm in the middle.
Nobody's here yet. Oh, no. No. Hmm. Well, I'll let these two people into the room and wait on everyone else. Okay, okay. Hi. Here come the others. All right. David's here. Trinae. AJ's in person. Marilyn. Victoria. Kyla. Okay, folks. Today we are gonna take our first look at what argumentative essays on the AP exam will actually look like. Oh. I'm sure Jillian just looks cute as a button with her bangs. Ever switch places when you went to the same school and neither of you had bangs? I'm asking Marilyn if she and her twin ever switched places, like when they went to the same school and looked the same.
We did it like once, but we were in the same class. We were in like preschool. We just switched book bags though.
Ah. Okay, I'm gonna put this up here. If we get through these quickly, then, you know, we'll just have some extra time. Because I don't think you guys have anything due right now. other than just make sure that you're ready to talk about part 1 of the book tomorrow. Yeah. Perfect. Okay. So I posted these things on Canvas. I'm going to share my screen with you guys, but I'm not going to pull them up in Canvas. I'm going to pull them up on my PDF just because it's easier to see and a little bit more convenient. Okay, so I mentioned before that when you get an argumentative prompt, it'll probably be like a quote. Sometimes it will be a passage, but that's pretty rare. Like this is actually fairly lengthy for an argumentative essay prompt. But you do want to make sure that you read through the whole thing so that you get all the information and so that you know what it is you're actually answering. So with this one, it kind of gives you this setup. Authors Poe Bronson, Poe, I believe that's a Teletubby, and Ashley Merriman published The Creativity Crisis in Newsweek.com in July 2010. They reported that the Torrance test, a test of creativity that has been administered to millions of people worldwide in 50 languages, indicates that the public's creativity quotient has steadily crept downwards since 1990. In their article, Brunson and Merriman cite the claim of Professor Kim out of the College of William and Mary. It's very clear and the decrease is significant. Kim reports that it's the scores of younger children in America from kindergarten through 6th grade for whom the decline is most serious. Brunson and Merriman state that the potential consequences are sweeping. The necessity of human ingenuity is undisputed. A recent IBM poll of 1,500 CEOs identified creativity as the #1 leadership competency of the future. Yet it's not just about sustaining our nation's economic growth. All around us are matters of national and international importance that are crying out for creative solutions, from saving the Gulf of Mexico to bringing peace to Afghanistan to delivering healthcare. Such solutions emerge from a healthy marketplace of ideas sustained by a populace constantly contributing original ideas and receptive to the ideas of others. So you've actually got a lot of information here. You've even got some stuff that you could potentially quote. But this next little bit, this last short paragraph, is what you're actually writing your essay about, or, you know, if you were writing an essay on this. One possible approach to this reputed decline in creativity is to explicitly teach creative thinking in school. Write to your school board explaining what you mean by creativity and arguing for or against the creation of a class in creativity. I'm gonna take my mask off because I'm really far away from you, if that's cool. Just because I'm reading a lot today and it's a lot easier without a mask. So here at the end, you want to notice that it's got kind of 2 parts that you're going to be writing about. You're writing to your school board, first of all, explaining what you mean by creativity, and people might have different answers for what that looks like, and arguing either for or against the creation of a class in creativity. So you want to make sure that you really thoroughly look at what the prompt is asking you to do and that you're doing all parts of that, because I could easily see this one, people only kind of answering the second part, arguing for or against the creation of a class in creativity, and not really addressing what you mean by creativity. But you do need to make sure that you do both of those parts. So I think it's a pretty interesting prompt, especially given that we go to like a creative arts school that probably tries a little bit harder than a lot of schools do to teach critical creative thinking. I mean, that's actually like one of the major benefits of Music Infusion, is that it teaches you to think more creatively and to use a creative art like music in a lot of your other disciplines. So it's interesting, the idea of creating a whole class to teach creative thinking. And, you know, I'm sure that people responded both ways there. I would say that just to kind of like go back over supporting, refuting, or qualifying, if you supported this argument, if you supported the idea of a class that teaches creativity, you could give lots of examples of like why that would work, or like how you would structure that class, why it would be important. If you were going to refute that, you could say like, I don't think it's worth making a whole class about it, because ideally you should learn creative thinking in a lot of different classes. And then qualifying the argument, qualifying, to kind of reiterate what that's like, it's like when you say that you support something with a particular exception, or that you disagree except for this particular time. So if you were going to qualify this argument, I guess an argument you could make would be like, that you don't think it's worth creating a whole class based on creativity, but inevitably some classes are going to automatically teach creativity or something like that. It'd be kind of hard. I don't know. So that's the prompt. What we're going to do is look at 3 sample essays and talk about what works for those, what doesn't work for them, why they score high or low. And again, we don't grade on the same scale anymore. We grade these essays on a 6-point scale, and back then we did a 9-point scale. So it's a little bit different. But I don't think I actually have, oh yeah, I did. One of them is scored really high, one's like in the middle, and one is pretty low. So we're gonna look at them and kind of go over what works and what doesn't. So pay attention to stuff like, does it have a strong thesis? Does it answer both parts of the question? Is it organized well? Like, is there a particular structure? Is the writing fairly sophisticated? And do they give examples from real life that help support what they're saying? One thing that is a good bit different between argumentative essays and rhetorical analysis essays is that it's a lot easier in a rhetorical analysis essay to kind of rely on quotes. And I mean, I try to kind of drive home the point that you shouldn't overly rely on quotes. You should use quotes from the passage to kind of bolster your own argument. But with this, you don't really have quotes to rely on. So you have to come up with all of the examples and everything yourself. And, you know, in one way that's harder because you don't have anything right in front of you to draw on. You have to think of it yourself. But on the other hand, it actually makes a much stronger essay. The more support you're able to give, the more examples you're able to kind of glean from real life, or depending on the topic, from literature or movies or the news or anything, the more like concrete examples you can think of to support your argument, the stronger your essay is going to be. So let's look at this first one. This is the highest scoring of the 3. So you're going to want to kind of keep your eye out for what's really working with this one. Okay. Creative thinking is central to today's idea-driven economy and technological advancement in the face of pressing national and international issues. Our society demands the need for creativity and novelty, making it essential that young people are made aware of the concept and introduced to its appropriate application from a young age. It's important to integrate the idea of creativity into school classrooms and teach the value of being able to develop novel ideas, apply and adapt them. But the creation of a class in creativity would not meet the purposes for which it was established. Instead, the value of creative thinking should be implemented into classes themselves. Thinking about that, we'll kind of go back over like whether they have a strong thesis. It is possible to score really high with a weak thesis, but it's rare. Sometimes people start out kind of weak and then write themselves into a good essay. But, you know, we'll see. We'll talk about whether this one was good. One of the most important steps to take in solving the problem associated with the decline in the public's creativity quotient is to help students understand what exactly it means to be creative and engage in creative thinking. In my opinion, I should leave that out. Creativity is the process of being able to develop novel or original ideas, be able to apply them, and then learn how to effectively adapt them to different circumstances. Creativity should be taught as being a fluid process, one that seamlessly integrates into such a wide range of applications, not as one that's a separate process altogether. The power of creativity lies in its applicability and is the school board's responsibility to ensure that it is this fact that is emphasized in schools. It's kind of a wordy, clunky sentence, but it's okay. Although the solution of creating a class in creativity seems like a good one from a superficial standpoint, further analysis of the consequences and purposes of such a class reveals that this is not the case. Teaching creative thinking as a separate class detracts from the overarching need to teach the versatility and value of creativity in different applications. A separate class would appear to teach the students that creative thinking is a separate and distinct entity that cannot be fused with the traditional school curriculum. So another class had to be created for the purpose of teaching them about the benefits of creativity. In my middle school, I took an elective entitled Creative Thinking, a class that was supposedly meant to increase our knowledge of the creative process through various projects and exercises. However, the problem was that this creative process was not referenced and reinforced in my other classes, making it difficult for me to make the connection of how creativity could be applied to the more traditional subjects. Instead of teaching creative thinking as a separate class, the school board should take immediate measures to ensure that the creative process is heightened and focused on in traditional classes. Many classes now focus on rote learning or busy work, something that makes it hard for students to see past and uncover the power their creativity can have on a particular field of study. Integrating creativity into the curriculum, while it would certainly require more steps to be taken and more effort to be exerted, would be much more valuable than a creative thinking class because of the inherent connection it would provide between creativity and problem solving, and emphasize the importance of the application of creative ideas. With the creativity crisis deepening and creativity becoming ever more imperative to global progress and human development, creative thinking needs to garner more importance in the school system. But because the value of creativity is so dependent upon its applicability and the ability to adapt solutions to problems in different circumstances, the creation of a class in creativity would not accomplish the goal and meet the purposes for which it was formed because of the distinction between creative thinking and other subjects it would create. A more viable solution that would potentially provide better results would be to integrate the teaching of the creative process into all subjects, helping students easily see the power of creativity and the fluidity of its applicability. Okay, so I do feel like the same words were kind of used a lot in this one. Like they kept saying creativity, obviously, applicability. What was the other one that I thought of? It was just like repeated. So I could have done without some of that, but let's take a look back at the intro. What do you guys think is the thesis here, and is it a good one? I'm pulling open the chat, guys. Trying to get it up. Yeah. Which sentence do you think is the thesis? Or is it more than one sentence? The last two, I think so too. It's important to integrate the idea of creativity into school classrooms and teach the value of being able to develop novel ideas, apply and adapt them, but the creation of a class and creativity would not meet the purposes for which it was established. Instead, the value of creative thinking should be implemented into classes themselves. AJ said she thought that it was like pretty weak, but it wasn't terrible. Like she used it well. I'm assuming it's a she. And I kind of agree with that. It's pretty wordy, and
I know that we don't need to have cut it straight to the point.
yeah, you could cut straight to the point a little bit sooner and more cleanly. I would kind of warn you against doing a thesis that's 2 sentences, just because ideally you'll want to like boil your thought down into 1 sentence. And if you have it stretching across 2 sentences, it can get kind of clunky and wordy like this one does. But that being said, this still scored really high. It got, back then it was a 9-point scale. It got an 8 out of 9, which is really good. Especially considering the fact that a 9 out of 9 is like super, super rare. But there are other things later on in the essay that are maybe a little bit stronger. So what are some of those things? What do you think worked really well in this essay? Why did it score so high? Vocabulary and tone. Yeah, I think that all kind of like goes into sophistication of writing. This is clearly like a really intelligent person. They're a good writer. About experiencing it. The like the class, her little personal example. Yeah. This is actually a really good example of using a personal anecdote for really strong positive purposes. You know, generally in this kind of essay, you want to avoid using I and me. And I did notice like earlier in the essay, she said like, in my opinion, blah, blah, blah. And that was really unnecessary because we already know it's her opinion. This whole thing is her opinion. She doesn't need to like go to bat for that. But here she's using first person pronouns in a really effective way because she's got a really relevant story to tell when she's talking about her middle school elective called creative thinking, and that it didn't really work. That really goes to support her thesis, and that's kind of that's the sort of example that you want to strive for. Whether it's something from your personal life or something that you've seen somewhere else, or even something like from a book or a movie or something, you want to make sure that whatever examples you're using go to really support your thesis and back up what you've said. So in this case, hers really does, because she's saying that it didn't really work. It was supposed to increase their knowledge of the creative process, but the problem was the creative process wasn't referenced or reinforced in any other classes. So, you know, if the point of teaching creative thought is to be able to do it in any kind of discipline or subject, then having one class dedicated to it is kind of counterintuitive, because, you know, you don't really tend to think about how each subject can be applied to each other. Like, you're not really thinking about the rules of English when you're in your math class. You're not really most of the time thinking about English when you're in your music classes. But ideally with creative thinking, you should be able to apply it to anything. So having it separate just kind of like, it doesn't work. She explained things really well for the most part. I do think it could be like a little bit shorter because I felt like she was sort of repetitive in spots. But I want to point out this conclusion, because conclusions are really tough. And I know that I've like commented on some of you guys' conclusions before, because you do want to do more than just reiterate what you already said in your introduction or elsewhere in your essay. You want to kind of reframe it, think about like what the larger implications are. So this is actually a pretty good one, because she kind of goes back to the prompt, first of all, when she says, with the creativity crisis deepening and creativity becoming ever more imperative to global progress, and human development, creative thinking needs to garner more importance in the school system. Which is, you know, it goes back to the prompt, and then also it kind of sets up this argument for it needs to become more important, but not necessarily through one class. Because the value of creativity is so dependent upon its applicability and the ability to adapt to solutions to problems in different circumstances, the creation of a class in creativity would not accomplish the goals and meet the purposes for which it was formed because of the distinction between creative thinking and the other subjects it would create. So I feel like she kind of said this elsewhere, or at least kind of got to that idea, but here she kind of just boils it down, and then suggests a more viable solution, which is a great way to end it. She's like, now that I've kind of like poo-pooed this idea of having it in one class, of teaching creative thinking in one class, here's a better idea. A more viable solution that will potentially provide better results would be to integrate the teaching of the creative process into all subjects, helping students easily see the power of creativity and the fluidity of its applicability. So that's a really nice conclusion. That's really strong. Like AJ said, the writing in this overall is really good. It's sophisticated writing. She does use a lot of good vocabulary without sounding like she's trying too hard to be like fancy and use elevated language. So that's nice. That's a good one. Okay, this next one scored like in the middle. It was like a 4 out of 9. So you're going to probably see a lot of stuff that could be improved on in this one. And it is a good deal shorter. And I think I said this the other day. I think it was in this class. Length does not necessarily determine quality. Like a longer essay is not always a better essay. I've seen some long essays that are just full of fluff. And I've seen some short essays that are really good and concise. But there does tend to be a bit of a correlation because longer essays tend to be more developed. Like I said, that's not always the case. Sometimes you're just writing because you feel like you haven't said enough yet and it's just fluff. But generally speaking, I kind of raise my hackles automatically at like a really short essay because it's hard to develop all of your ideas really thoroughly if your essay's like one handwritten page. So I just saw that this one was 2, and I haven't read it in a year, but let's look at it. Okay, so we're starting out the intro with a question, which is a good way to start. It's a good little hook, but let's see how strong the thesis is and then what else they talk about, and if it's organized, if the ideas are thoroughly developed. We'll see. What is it that makes a world power? Is it the money, the political parties, the equality of the nation's people? To all of the above, yes. However, to summarize, what makes a world power emerge is the ability to get ahead and be able to give the unexpected. The recent drought in the creativity of our nation's children can be significantly important. This decrease of the public's creativity quotient is seen as more than crucial to our nation's future. So already I'm seeing one big error with this intro. Can anybody like
This catchy hook doesn't make sense.
the hook doesn't make sense?
No.
What doesn't make sense about it?
I don't know how power. I don't think creativity has to do with world power.
Yeah, you're on the money. Creativity, like what does creativity have to do with world power? I'm not saying nothing, but I don't think that this person really walks us to the door there and shows us what it has to do with it. And more importantly, if you notice, not only does she not start talking about creativity until the very end, but at least in the intro, or whatever her thesis is supposed to be, she's not answering the question. What is creativity, and do you think that having a class to teach creativity is a good idea? And I actually forgot to mention in that first essay, she didn't answer the first part, the what is creativity, in her thesis, and that's okay. Like the thesis still did answer part of the question, but she did talk about it later on. She kind of defined what she thought creativity meant. So even though she didn't do that in her thesis, I think that's hard to do when you have multiple things you're trying to answer. To answer both of them in a thesis can be tough. So it's fine that she didn't do that. She did define it later, so it's all good. This person doesn't seem to be answering the question, which is definitely an issue. If we're looking at what her thesis is, like I'm looking at those last two sentences, the recent drought in the creativity of our nation's children can be significantly important. That's a pretty vague statement anyway, so I don't think that's the thesis. This decrease of the public's creativity quotient is seen as more than crucial to our nation's future. Not wrong, but you just need to go a little bit further to get to a solid argumentative thesis. We don't know if she thinks that a class is a good idea, so let's keep going and see if she clears that up. Sometimes creativity is thought of as only the art of painting, drawing, and artistically creating things. However, this is not the case. Who's to say that our nation would have survived the World War I or II? Oh, maybe they scratched that out. Survived World War I or II without the brilliant minds of our army generals. We rely solely on our mental capacities to give us an immense amount of options in overcoming a problem, while generalities are looked down upon. Still haven't answered the question. She's throwing me off a little bit too. It feels like pretty disjointed. Like, I don't know. It's hard to like follow the line of her thought. To also take into account, what of the creative minds that help create the things we honor to this very day? The Lincoln Memorial, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, the Washington Monument are all things that took thought and imagination to be built in a political way. I'm confused about it. Well, I guess she's saying that like these monuments and stuff take creativity to build, but I don't really know what, like, in a political way. I don't know what that means. These monuments and memorials are things seen of great importance and respected accomplishments in our country. What will we have if we lack the ability to not only appreciate, but also add to these accomplishments? So she's like in the neighborhood of answering the question, because obviously she thinks creativity is very important, but she's not just saying it. Our entire nation's history's core is creativity. From the ability to assimilate other cultures to an idealistic one, to the civil rights movements in the early 1900s. That's a fragment. Our nation does not grow, or better yet, improve without the ability to create new ways, art forms, or cultural advancements. It is for our nation's greater good to create a class for the sake of creativity. I feel like her thesis, she doesn't actually say her thesis until the conclusion, which is not good. But she has at least like finally gotten here, which is probably, I was going to say I probably wouldn't have even scored her as high as she got because she hadn't answered the question. But she has answered the question now. She's just written a whole lot more before she got there. The class could only be beneficial to children and our future. If we do not save the children of our country now, they will not be able to save us in the future. Our country relies on creative minds to continue our place as a world power and to only get ahead rather than taking steps backwards. So, okay, even though I don't understand the world power thing, she calls back to something in the conclusion that she talked about in the intro. That's nice. She did finally answer the question, which is probably why she scored as high as she did. I kind of feel like she spent a page and 3/4 saying stuff that should be intro. And then she spent that last quarter saying stuff that should be the body of the essay. So what else?
Excuse me, teachers. Juliana Radaczewski, please report to the main office for dismissal. Juliana Radaczewski, please report to the main office for dismissal. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else that y'all thought of as I was reading this that you were like, this doesn't work very well, or like, I would do this differently? I'd say the writing is not as sophisticated in this one as it was in the other. Anything else you guys noticed? Okay, let's move on to the third and worst. So I'm already telling you this is not great, but we'll see what we think is working or not working, why it didn't score very well. I'm trying to move this little thing. God dang it. Okay, I'm just gonna close that. Okay, well, to start off, this is just like a paragraph and a half, kind of. Or technically, I guess it's 3 paragraphs, but, oops, sorry. No, wait. No, it's only 1 paragraph. Cool. So that's not promising. Creativity can be identified as many things. Vague statement, but okay. Creativity starts from what you think and how you express yourself. Just like in the text, creativity can create solutions to many situations. Some people are born with creativity and others are not. I feel like creativity can be created if you just think deep and outside the box. The creation of a class in creativity has its pros and cons. Having a creativity class will definitely challenge many students when it comes to think. This will force students to think deep and more critically. It all depends on what extent or level you want to take creativity to. Okay, so this didn't score very highly, we know that, but why didn't it? What is wrong with this? It's very short. This is maybe like an introduction, and I wouldn't even say it's a good introduction, but what do you guys see about it that is not what you would think of as being a strong essay? Other than just being short. Yeah, the vocabulary is pretty simple. And I would say, like,
Well, you don't need like you don't have to have big in your face vocabulary.
yeah, but this is pretty like elementary sounding. It's just not sophisticated writing. Part of that, I would say, yes, really simple language. And I mean, what AJ just said was you don't have to have like huge in your face kind of vocabulary to be impressive, but it kind of sounds like a much younger person wrote this. There were several things off the bat that I was like, oh, these are like the big no-nos. They use both first and second person, like I feel like, and it depends on how you express yourself. All things that you don't really want to do. It seems like it's really repetitive, which is weird considering there's not that many sentences. But like creativity starts from what you think and how you express yourself. Creativity can be created if you just think deep and outside the box. This will force students to think deep and more critically. All kind of saying the same thing. I did also just want to point out, when you are addressing a prompt or like a passage that you read or anything like that, you want to like specifically say what you're talking about. So for this one, what was the name of the, you'd want to say like in the article, The Creativity Crisis, or like in the piece from Newsweek, this person said whatever, but the person who wrote it says just like in the text, and it's like, what text? And even though we kind of know because we're all reading the same thing, you need to be specific. I feel like creativity, we don't really care what he feels like, he or she. They did refer to the question, so like we're on topic, but barely. And then I think the thing that kind of like rubs me the most wrong way is that everything's really vague. I feel like every sentence in this is just kind of fluff, which honestly I expect what happened is that this is question 3. This person would have already written a synthesis essay and a rhetorical analysis. I think this person ran out of time and was like, I got to put something down. At least I hope that's the case, because this is not very good. It's not very strong. And they just don't say a lot. And every single sentence is sort of like, it's just vague. Like the first sentence, creativity can be identified as many things. Well, tell me what some of those things are. Creativity starts from what you think and how you express yourself. Again, like really vague, and also referring to this vague nebulous you. I don't know who that is supposed to be. Some people are born with creativity and others are not. Well, yeah. So it's all just, it's not very specific. This person doesn't have any kind of examples backing it up. Like I said, it's hard to find good things about this because they don't even have a whole essay. And I think probably the worst thing you can do is like not write a whole essay, other than writing something that's really, really off topic or doesn't answer the question. Make sure you have an intro, a body, and at least a concluding sentence. If you're like running out of time and a sentence is all you have time for, better to put a sentence than nothing at all. But you want to just try to flesh out your ideas and really develop them as thoroughly as you have the time to do. So I'm looking forward to, I haven't looked at your in-class essays from the other day yet, but let me stop sharing my screen so I can kind of look at my lesson plans coming up. The first time that we do like an argumentative essay, I don't think I'm gonna do, no, we're not gonna do an in-class essay before Christmas, but you'll write one outside of class. So I'll look forward to reading that.
It's 2 o'clock.
Thank you. So I'm just going to end like 9 minutes early. I wanted to make sure we had time to get through those, and we did. So you can kind of see like what these essays should look like, what some of your goals should be when you start writing them, and we got that accomplished. So that's going to be it for today. You and I'll just hang out for 9 minutes, and I'll see y'all tomorrow.